Living on a farm is the ultimate dream for most people who can't stand the sight of concrete. Rivers flowing, birds singing, children playing. Seems like a happy and peaceful family life. Until it's not. Although the farm was settled in a remote location, the Gruber family was known in that area even before the fateful night. Andreas Gruber was not very social by nature, and domestic violence was not foreign to him. It was rumored that Andreas was also the father of his 2-year-old grandson, which means that the family had problems on several fronts. He controlled his daughter Victoria, who was a widow, and forbade her to remarry. However, she was allowed to go to church, where she was part of the church choir. If this set of circumstances does not speak of an already strange and twisted life, things got even worse when the maid announced that she had to leave her job. According to her, she heard voices in the house and stayed awake countless nights because of the sounds of footsteps coming from the attic. She felt some bad energy on the property, and fearing for her health and consciousness, left the farm only 6 months before the fateful night, which in hindsight proved that she actually wasn't insane. And unfortunately, that event took place on March 31st, 1922. The total body count of that terrible night was 6. In addition to Andreas, there was also his wife, Casilia, then their daughter, Victoria, then a new maid who replaced an old one, named Maria. To make matters worse for her, these murders actually happened on Maria's first day in her new job for the Gruber family. This horrible act didn't bypass the 2 of Victoria's children who were in the house, Casilia and Joseph, who were only 7 and 2 years old. The exact timeline of events on that night would not be determined, but it is believed that the killer lured the victims one by one to the barn before killing them using a weapon which resembled something like a pickaxe. In the days leading up to 31st March, when the family were savagely killed, neighbors recalled Andreas complaining about cattle being let loose in the field at night and generally being overly restless. Each time, Andreas would have to come out to retrieve the cow or settle the animals back down from being spooked. Was this the killer seeing what was needed to lure Andreas from his house? On the night when Andreas went to settle the restless livestock down and was murdered, did members of the family come out one by one to see why Andreas had been unsuccessful to settle them down before being killed themselves? It seems like a likely explanation given what we actually know leading up to the event. The exceptions are 2-year-old Joseph, who was killed in his bed, and a maid who was killed in her room. Autopsy reports showed that the elder Casilia received 7 blows to the head, which led to the cracking of the skull. Her husband's face was so disfigured that the cheekbones were visible. Their daughter Victoria's head was crushed, and she also had several star-shaped wounds. The jaw of the younger Casilia was broken and her face and neck were covered with blow wounds, while she had parts of her hair in her hands. According to reports, she was not killed immediately, but was next to her dead parents for some time, and it is assumed that in a fit of panic and fear, she started pulling her hair out. Inside the house, the maid and little Joseph were killed with one precise blow. After this horrible event, there was a suspicion that a killer actually spent the next 4 days in the house, because the neighbors saw an active chimney. It is also believed that a killer used the kitchen and prepared meals for himself in that period, while all the animals on the farm continued to have feed put in their throats. On April 1st, coffee sellers Hans and Edward Shirovsky arrived in Hinterkaifeck to take an order. When no one responded to knocking on the door and the window at the Gruber residence, they walked around the yard but found no one. They only noticed that a gate to the machine house was open before they decided to leave. Over 4 days, others from the surrounding area dropped by, and they all reported the same thing. The farm looks like it was abandoned. Around 4 p.m., Lawrence Schlittenbauer sent his son and stepson to Hinterkaifeck to see if they could make contact with the family. When they reported that they didn't see anyone, Schlittenbauer formed a team to head up to the farm the same day. When they arrived, they stepped into the horror. After the case was reported, the police primarily pointed fingers at the drifters as possible suspects, but that theory was quickly dismissed when larger quantities of intact money were found on the property. The list of other suspects was long, but it seemed as if everyone had an alibi and solid evidence was simply not present. This was also the case with the Thaler brothers, who were suspected as well, according to a statement by the former maid, Crescens Rieger. The brothers had already committed several minor burglaries in the area before the crime. Rieger said that Joseph Thaler stood at her window at night and asked her questions about the family, which she didn't answer. In conversation, Joseph Thaler claimed to know which family member was sleeping in which room and stated that they had a lot of money. However, we already know the money was there, so you see the problem. The same case was with Peter Weber, who was named suspect by Joseph Betts. The two worked together in the winter of 1919-1920 as laborers, and they shared a chamber. According to Betts, Weber spoke of a remote farm, Hinterkaifeck. Weber knew that only one old couple lived there with their daughter and her 2 children. He likely knew about the incest between Gruber and his daughter. Betts testified in a hearing that Weber had actually suggested killing the old man to get the family's money, but when Betts didn't respond to the offer, Weber stopped talking about it. In the absence of solid evidence, the police also considered the possibility of a suicide pact between Andreas and Casilia, but that idea quickly fell through after the wounds didn't match the time intervals for such a thing. Since there were no further evidence, in 1923 the farm was burned to the ground. The years went by and things kept going. Then, in 1971, it seemed like a new evidence was surfacing when a woman named Therese wrote a letter citing an event in her youth. At the age of 12, she witnessed her mother receiving a visit from the mother of 2 brothers, Karl and Andras. The woman claimed that her sons from Zattelberg were the 2 murderers of Hinterkaifeck. During the course of the conversation, the mother said Andres regretted that he lost his penknife. When the farm was demolished in 1923, a pocket knife was found that could not be assigned to anyone. However, the knife could have easily belonged to one of the murder victims. This track was followed without result because the former maid of Hinterkaifeck was certain she had already seen the penknife in the yard during her service. All remained silent until 1999, when an elderly German lady came forward to the police saying that in 1935 her landlord claimed to her that he actually had information on the Hinterkaifeck murders. police acted quickly to make contact with the former landlord, only to find that he actually died, and any information would be taken to his grave. The years went by and things kept standing still, when in 2007 a team made up of students at a police academy used modern techniques to investigate the case once again and managed to reduce the list to one person. But because they were living dissidents and out of respect for them, the suspect's name was never released. What we do know though is that on the day of the funeral of the Hinterkaifeck murders, Sterbbildchen cards were handed out. These are the memorial cards handed out at funerals to the deceased. It was reported that someone had written the words incest and judgment from above to the cards. Was this a message from the killer on their motive? Today, all that remains of the Hinterkaifeck farm is a stone memorial to remember the Gruber family that lost their lives in the most savage way. But still, the case remains unresolved and chances are high that it will remain so for a long time.